Thank you for joining us for our next streaming episode in the Friends of Chamber Music Now series. I'm Lacie Eades. Our next concert features the internationally recognized Dover Quartet performing works by Mendelssohn and Dvorak. I was fortunate to speak with Milena, Joel, Camden, and Brian about their experiences as a professional string quartet and their recent documentary, Strings Attached. Please enjoy this interview and concert brought to you by the Friends of Chamber Music and our sponsors. Thank you so much for joining us today. Would you mind to take a minute and introduce yourselves, both as the quartet and individually?
Sure, we're the Dover Quartet, and my name's Milena, I'm the violist.
My name's Camden, I'm the cellist.
My name is Brian, I'm the second violinist.
My name is Joel, I'm the first violinist.
Great, well, it's so wonderful to meet you and get to thank you so much for your time to chat today. And so we'll talk about a few different things as we go throughout our time together. But I first want to congratulate you on your Grammy nomination and look forward to watching tonight and catching up on the results. So best wishes on that. Well,
Thank you.
Yes. So I want to ask you first, and just feel free, whoever can jump in, but what drew you to classical music?
Ooh. I think probably for all of us, it was a little bit different. I'm the youngest of three. So actually my sister had begun a little bit before, and apparently I really thought that I could play too when I was really young, and I hadn't ever learned. So I think it was always present in the house, and I can't remember a time when it wasn't. So it was like kind of like classical music had always been there for me in a lot of ways. So I'm not really, I don't remember like a moment where I was drawn to it.
Yeah, my story is kind of similar to Joel, youngest of four kids, and yeah, just grew up hearing music around the house all the time. So it was just kind of, I feel like a natural progression for me to want to also want to play violin or some sort of musical instrument.
Yeah, I was also the youngest child, just out of two. But interestingly, actually, the reason I started cello was that my family, they were all musicians, including my older sister, and they wanted to play string quartets as a family. And so they just needed a cellist. I was the last to exist, and so I had no choice in the matter. I actually really wanted to play trumpet because my uncle is a phenomenal trumpet player, professional. And so I of course grew up listening to my parents and sister, but I wanted to be like my uncle. So they told me I could never play trumpet. I forget what their reason was, something about my lips, but it was a lie. So, but I loved cello, and actually, but to be honest, at the beginning, it was kind of stressful because I was a beginner, and that we were actually reading Beethoven quartets when I was really small. I could not play anything, but it was still fun.
What a way to just jump in.
It definitely was.
I think, oh yeah, so I'm the only one in the group who's the oldest child. I have three younger siblings, and neither of my parents are professional musicians. My mom didn't play any instrument, but my dad, who was a surgeon, does play piano. And he was the one in the family who really loved classical music and kind of introduced me to it as my very first piano teacher when I was 3 or 4 years old. And I quickly was a stubborn little kid who didn't want him to tell me what to do. So they said, well, okay, I won't teach you piano, but pick an instrument because it's good to have music in your life. And so then I got to choose, and I picked violin, which is the instrument I started with, I guess, technically after piano. And then I switched to viola when I was a senior in high school.
Oh, great. Great. Well, it's wonderful to hear. In so many ways, it sounds like classical music found you, and you just embraced it, and all of you embraced it. And now you're working together and providing us with such beautiful beautiful music. So with that, as your time, both as an ensemble and maybe in previous solo works, what are some of the standout moments from your professional careers? Like, have there been particular venues or particular performances that are just the highlights?
Well, it almost might sound like a cliche, but we had one experience. We were playing in Carnegie Hall, in Stern Auditorium, which is kind of like the big formal hall, and we were playing a concert with Janine Jensen and Jean-Yves Thibaudet at the piano, and just the feeling. It's really, for musicians, that hall is like hallowed ground, and we played there. And when we were in school in the Curtis Symphony Orchestra. But there was something about walking into the middle of this enormous stage, to where there were just a few chairs and stands where we were going to create music together, that was really electric. And I think we were all just at our best and actually really inspired and feeling very free. And that was certainly a standout for me.
Yeah. For me, the first one that comes to mind is, I don't remember what the town was exactly, but it was a little town in England in like the middle of farmland. And we played in this tiny stone church. It was actually really hard to hear in there. So it was a unique experience just in that sense of how resonant the space was. And we played in a circle facing one another. So it felt both very intimate and very intense, because there was so much sound going around. But at that concert, we felt so lucky to be able to travel the world and do that, because after the concert we met someone. Turns out he was the great grandnephew of Charles Darwin or something like that. And just to have it hit us, like the amount of different people we might not even know we're meeting and connecting with when we get to go around the world like that.
Right. That's the sort of thing that would only happen in a tiny town in England, right? Oh, what a wonderful, and like you said, who knows who's in your audiences as you go around the world. Yeah. All right. So with that, talking about the different types of music that you play, what are some of your favorite composers to play? Or maybe not particular just composers, but different eras of classical music. What are some of your favorites? Maybe Joel and Brian, if you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably I'm a huge fan of the Romantic period, and like I love. I mean, I guess you can, what they say, Beethoven kind of straddled both, but I think of him more as classical generally. But I mean, I think I'll include him here. I adore Beethoven. I love Brahms, Dvorak, all those guys like who were. I feel like they were really kind of getting onto something very personal and unique. Not to say that other people weren't, but in a style that was very relatable, I think. So, I mean, it's hard to pick out favorites. There's so many good ones, but
I feel like we also have gravitated in the more recent years towards composers from the second Viennese school. There's just something about that language. It is actually incredibly romantic. And it's so expressionist, and yeah, just the sound world is so unique and special, I think.
I was going to jump on Brian's train of the second Viennese. There's always so much going on in the music. It's really satisfying as a performer. I think it can be hard, especially for first-time listeners, to really get into that sound world and that language. But when we're playing the music over and over, those are the pieces for me that just keep on giving. There's always something new to find in the music. There's always something really exciting and interesting to do just physically with your instrument in the moment. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I think for me too, Schumann has really climbed the ladder in my mind as a favorite composer, and I think it's almost criminal that he's not often mentioned as like a top tier. He's sort of thought of as maybe not quite as good as Brahms, like similar to Brahms, not quite as good. And I think that's so unfair. He had a sort of troubled life, and it was cut short in his career because of his mental illness, but he had a certain magic, I think, about his moments that was really special and unique to him too. And I think the older that I get, the more I really love his music.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the older that you get, because we do, as listeners and performers, we change as we're encountering this music, and it always has something to offer us. And I particularly enjoy the way you all draw out those special musical elements in your performances. It's a real treat to listen to you play.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So the Friends of Chamber Music will be streaming your documentary, Strings Attached. Can you tell us a little bit about this documentary and how the project came about?
For sure. I actually feel like Milena may have more direct line to it, but we kind of met this film producer actually who was a kind of a growing up. You explain it, Milena. How did we really meet, like Bruce? I mean, you've known him for such a long time.
I've known Bruce, the director. I've known him since I was 10 years old.
Right. So
basically family. But that's not really how it came about. I mean, we had been thinking, as we were talking about before, traveling a lot as a quartet, people saw us in airports and were like, hey, are you guys a band? And we would say, well, kind of, in a way, we're a classical string quartet. And they would be really surprised. Oh, I would never have guessed that. You don't look like that. And then we thought, what does that mean to look like a string quartet? Like, what is this perception that people have of what you look like if you play classical music, or how old you should be, perhaps? Right. And around that time, when we were like starting to really tour a lot, this would have probably been 7 years ago or so, we were thinking about maybe doing a documentary or something like that. And we could have gone the route of working with a director who was very involved in the classical music world and had made films about classical music before, but that wasn't really the point of the film. The point was more to kind of show what life was like, why we do what we do, kind of open the window into this world to people who might not actually be connected to it in the first place. And Bruce, who I happen to have known for so many years, and also watched another documentary of his called Chops that follows a young, I guess a middle school through high school. It follows this jazz band, student jazz band in Florida that is just so well done, so exhilarating and rewarding to watch. And it's through the eyes of someone who was never in the music world himself. And I think that really adds a lot to it. So luckily we had this personal connection. So we approached Bruce to see if he'd be interested, and he was. So that's how it came about.
It turned out so well, and I can't wait for our viewers to watch it. I think they're just going to enjoy it so much. So, with this idea of, opening the window into the world of being a professional classical musician, what are some of the things that you all do to bring a break? Because being a musician requires so much time. It's hard to turn off the rehearsal and turn off the mental preparation, even when you're not actually at your instrument. So what are some ways that the Dover Quartet creates that space?
I like to do yoga. I like to bake and hike, and I binge TV shows. I'm gonna be honest about it. I love TV.
we all do that.
Yeah,
I think actually we're all pretty physical too. I was just gonna say, like, all of us are pretty active with exercise in different ways, and yeah, I like calisthenics, which is kind of like amateur gymnastics, basically, the way that I do it, and it's fun.
Some of us like video games. I'm like on the lower end of I still play a couple every now and then, but two people who happen to be in the same frame right now.
Yeah, we're probably the biggest gamers in the quartet for sure. Yeah, we both also like running, so that's a nice way to sort of de-stress and declutter, I guess.
And prepare your body for the toil of sitting down and playing video games for long periods of time.
They're going to say practicing, but no.
That would be toil, then that would be enjoyment.
Practicing's nothing compared to video games.
Right. The amount of focus required.
Well, the last year has certainly provided lots of time for doing all of those activities. So how has the pandemic affected both your performance schedule and your rehearsal? If anyone would like to weigh in on that.
I mean, a lot.
Mm-hmm. At first, we didn't even see each other for 4 months, which was huge after basically 12 years of being together almost every day.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely felt weird.
And now our performance schedule is basically, it's completely turned upside down. We do lots of recording. Where, as a matter of fact, one of the reasons Joel and Brian are in the same room right now is we're all doing a recording project together with a group called Brooklyn Duo way out in Bellingham, Washington. So we've been doing lots of recording and lots of teaching via Zoom.
Mm-hmm. So do you foresee when we do get to go back to live performances, do you think digital performances will still be a part of the professional performers' lives? Now our audience is going to expect that, do you think?
I think on some level, potentially. I mean, I feel like even if it's like an initiative to be able to host more concerts while not having necessarily all the groups kind of show up in person. And I feel like, now that we've been doing this for so long, people are a little less afraid of its limitations, and people are very acknowledging of its limitations because we've been living with it, and it's been the best thing that we've had for about a year. So I don't know in what capacity. I don't think it's going to replace live concert because I don't think that is possible. I think that is another thing I feel like I've really noticed and learned through the pandemic is that all this stuff is definitely not a substitute for just being in a place with like live humans like emitting energy right towards you. So yeah, I don't know in what capacity, but I do think it'll be around. I
think so too, especially just in the sense that now we realize just how far we can connect to people around the world. I know our hometown series in Philadelphia started doing, streaming their concerts this season, and they were stunned at the places from which people were watching and tuning in their concerts all around the world. So I think that's been a really nice silver lining to be able to connect that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And certainly for people who in the future maybe can't attend a concert for whatever reason, even if it's a health reason or something like that, the idea that we might be able to have both going on, like a hybrid thing where it's live, but then if you can't come, you can also tune in. And yeah, I think it's opening up a lot of interesting options and opportunities for the future.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, this is such a pivotal point in our music history, and to, what are people going to say about this time 100 years from now? And, you're living the history of it right now. So we will be featuring a streaming performance of music by Mendelssohn and Dvorak. So are there any particular moments in these pieces that you would like to highlight for our listeners? And both pieces are just absolutely incredible. But what are some of those standout moments that we should keep our ears open for?
In the Mendelssohn, this is one thing that when pieces have this quality or this attribute, I suppose, it's just so satisfying. The opening material, the opening theme from the first movement comes back in the last movement in the most beautiful and nostalgic and gratifying way. It just ties the entire experience of the piece together. That part always gives me chills. So I would listen out for that.
Great.
And then Dvorak. Someone want to say about something awesome about the Dvorak?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I think we often talk about the slow movement as being this incredible jewel of the piece, and it's actually quite in a very understated way. It's a very big second violin showcase. Actually, it opens with this incredibly somber chord from the lowest two, and then the second violin gets this beautiful, like really gut-wrenching solo in a lot of ways, and it's kind of like an exploration. You can almost think of it as like a theme and variations kind of movement. It's really not, but it's the same theme kind of is pulsing through the entire movement all the time and always slightly different, slightly differently orchestrated, and sometimes really big and rolled with chords, and other times very quiet and intimate. And I think just that exploration is among one of the things that I think Dvorak does best. And you see it in like an incredible example in this piece. So,
yeah, that slow movement is the reason I wanted to play that quartet in the first place.
That's pretty amazing. I feel like actually the Dvorak is similar to the Mendelssohn in that
It does it too.
yeah, the opening sort of material comes back in the last movement in such a different way actually, and it's really a special piece because of that, I think.
We'll definitely listen for those themes, because that is such a gratifying, just those things to grab onto, and just makes everything feel complete. So. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and for chatting with us. Again, we are so excited to share your music with our viewers here in Kansas City, and we look forward to getting to hear you live when things return back to normal. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Of course, best wishes on the things that are to come, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
okay, well,
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.